Ezekiel chapter 7, verse 25. Destruction cometh, and they shall seek peace, and there shall be none. Mischief shall come upon mischief, and rumor shall be upon rumor. Then shall they seek a vision of the prophet, but the law shall perish from the priests, and counsel from the ancients. In the news, from the RT, Putin gives update on newest Sarmat ICBM deployment. Russia's newest Sarmat nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missile will be deployed in 2022, President Vladimir Putin has said. We have successfully tested the Sarmat heavy intercontinental ballistic missile. According to the plan, the first such system will enter combat duty at the end of the year, Putin said in an address to graduating cadets on Tuesday. The Sarmat was test fired in April. The missile will replace the old Voyavoda systems, also known by the NATO reporting name SS-18 Satan. Dmitry Rogozin, the head of the Russian space agency Roscosmos, said in April that the Sarmat, dubbed Satan II, is the most powerful missile of its class in terms of range and warheads. It was designed to be invincible to all existing air defenses, he said. Rogozin added that Sarmats are much faster than Voyevodas and can strike targets at virtually unlimited range. Colonel General Sergei Karakayev, the commander of Russia's strategic rocket forces, announced this month that modernization with top-notch combat-ready missiles, including the Sarmat and the Avangard hypersonic glide weapon, will reach 86% by the end of 2022. In other news, also from the RT, Putin announces deployment of S-500 air defense systems. Russia's most advanced anti-aircraft and anti-missile weapons are already being delivered to the military. The president has said the Russian military is in the process of deploying the S-500, the most advanced air defense system in the country, President Vladimir Putin said on Tuesday. The Russian leader made the announcement during an address to the graduates of military colleagues in Moscow as he described Russia's plans for fielding advanced weapon systems, which he said will determine the combat capabilities of the Army and the Navy for years and decades to come. Putin stated that the S-500 long-range missile system, which is designed to intercept aircraft and missiles and may have some anti-satellite capabilities, had no equal in the world. This concludes this article. This tells us that nations have, in fact, been beating their plowshares into swords and their pruner hooks into spears. That is to say that they have been taking their economic wealth and using it towards the research, development, and enhancements of weapons of mass destruction, such as the intercontinental ballistic missile and missile defense systems, such as the S-500 and Russia's Satan II. Because the Lord Yahweh, through His Son Yahweh Shai, has put it in their minds to understand this, that we are in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Verse 8, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. And so Yahweh B'Ashem Yahweh Shai has put it in the minds of these different leaders of these different countries and their generals to beat their plowshares into swords and pruning hooks into spears, because we are in a time of war. And what war? The Third World War, which draws nigh, according to biblical prophecy here in Revelation chapter 11, verse 14, which will happen after the mandation of the MOTB, which is the RFID microchip, also known as the NFC chip implant in Europe, also known as the biochip implant. Revelation chapter 11, verse 14, the second war is past, and behold, the third war cometh quickly. And so they are preparing for the third war, which cometh quickly, which will be fought in the valley of Jehoshaphat, according to the book of Joel, the 3rd chapter, which Jehoshaphat in the Hebrew is Yahweh Shaphat, which means Yahweh's judgment, because that is where the Lord is going to gather the heathen nations round about to judge them. The valley of Jehoshaphat is located in the Arabian Peninsula in the Middle East. Okay, now going back to the articles, and by the way, Third World War will be fought with burning and fuel of fire. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 5. For every battle of the warriors with confused noise and garments rolled in blood. But this shall be burning and fuel of fire. So the Third World War will be fought with burning and fuel of fire. Okay. But before I read on in the third article, I want to give all praises, blessings, glories, and honors to Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai Bahashim, Racha Kodash. Double honors to my elder apostles and bishop elders of Great Millstone who have taught me this truth, as well as men of like mind. Shalom wa chasad, which means peace and mercy to the elect of the nation of Israel, whom we so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native American Indians, and Israelite foreigners of the seed of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We're scattered here in America, which is Babylon the Great, and abroad. To you I say Shalom and Yahweh Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai Ratazah. This lesson is edifying. This article is also from the RT. Protesters chant "Stop NATO" at massive rally in heart of EU. Tens of thousands demonstrated against the rising cost of living, and many have been experiencing rising costs of living due to high inflation and supply chain constraints, which only adds more pressure on the production industry, which only adds more pressure on the consumer industry. With many linking the crisis to the West's Russia policies. A trade union organized protests numbering 70,000 to 80,000, that's a lot of people, demonstrators packed the streets of Brussels on Monday. I believe Brussels, if I'm not mistaken, is in Belgium, excuse me. So Brussels is in Belgium. Slovakia for that. Bring the city to a standstill. In addition to expressing anger at the rising cost of living in Belgium, and this is the point, many condemned the US-led NATO alliance. Now, what should immediately come to our minds? Revelation, the 17th chapter. The 16th verse. And the 10 horns, and the 10 horns represents the EU, which thou sawest upon the beast. The beast represents NATO. Now remember that the beast is the pagan Roman Empire, which came back in the form of NATO and the EU, with America being an extension of that empire, because America is the whore that rideth upon the beast, 7 heads, which represents NATO, and 10 horns, which represents the EU. Okay? These represent the 10 horns, which is the EU, shall hate the whore. The whore is America, Babylon the Great. And we're seeing an example of that we're seeing an example of America's allies beginning to hate her because now they're condemning the U.S.-led NATO alliance, which is ran by America, Babylon the Great, primarily because America is the head of NATO, okay, for its involvement in the Ukrainian conflict. We're seeing them expressing their hatred for America now. And this is all a part of biblical prophecy. Okay, so we're filtering the news via the scriptures, linking everything with prophecy. Okay, these shall hate the whore and shall make her desolate and naked. And how are they going to make her desolate? By way of thermonuclear fire. And shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire, with nuclear fire. Okay, so the Lord is going to put the spirit upon America's allies to soon hate America on an even wider, publicly known scale. It's going to be made apparent and obvious that America's allies are against her. Okay. And its involvement in the Ukrainian conflict. And this concludes the series of articles that I compiled together. Now, going to the actual apps. In other news from the RT, EU told to prepare for total Russian gas cutoff. These are simply more mischiefs upon mischiefs, which the Lord Yahweh through His Son Yahweh Shai is causing to, go about throughout the whole world. Moscow's current supply reductions are geared toward avoiding European filling storage, IEA chief says. IEA chief Fatih Birol has warned the EU to be prepared for the possibility of a complete shutdown of Russian gas exports this winter, calling on the bloc's members to widen the span of measures amid preparing for this scenario. Financial Times reporting on Wednesday. Europe should be ready in case Russian gas is completely cut off. The nearer we are coming to winter, the more we understand Russia's intentions, he said, as cited by the news outlet. Commenting on Gazprom slashing 60% of gas supplies via the Nord Stream pipeline last week, which the Russian company stresses is purely technical, Birol said that the cuts are geared towards avoiding European filling storage and increasing Russia's leverage in the winter months. Now, people are going to need, oil and gas during the winter so that they can heat their homes, so that they won't freeze. And in some cases, freeze to death, depending on how severe the winter weather is. However, the IEA has been openly accusing Russia of manipulating gas prices since last year, when the cost of gas in Europe spiked to all-time highs. Emergency measures taken by European countries this week to reduce gas demand, such as firing up old coal-fired power stations, were justified by the scale of the crisis despite concerns rising carbon emissions. He stated, adding that, in his opinion, the return to coal-firing energy generation will be temporary and help keep enough gas supplies for the upcoming heating season. Germany, Australia, Italy, and the Netherlands announced their plans to step up use of coal for power generation, while Sweden and Denmark said they would also launch emergency measures to curb the use of natural gas. Birol warned, however, that current measures do not go far enough if Russian gas exports stop completely, and suggested that European governments should step up efforts to fill storage facilities, among other options. I believe there will be more and deeper demand measures taken by governments in Europe as winter approaches, Birol said. He noted that gas rationing is a possibility, which could help offset the consequences of losing Russian gas, and offered the bloc to consider postponing closures of nuclear power plants as long as the safety conditions are there. And Europe is only hurting itself because of America's sanctions and America's influence on them and over them to use them against Russia, to gain leverage over Russia. But that's why America's allies are going to begin to hate America, because they're going to reason within themselves and see that the reason why they're in their detrimental condition and state is because of America, Babylon the Great. Okay. In other news, earthquake kills at least 1,000 in Afghanistan. Well, that's judgment of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. What comes to mind? Job chapter 4, verse 9. Nobody perish being innocent. Germany on the verge of gas emergency alarm stage. You'll burn anything to keep people warm. Czech official. And these are the bits of relevant information that we'll just simply read here in RT. Now let's go to the CNN app and see what's also in the news. 29 Chinese warplanes sent into skies near Taiwan. Again, we'll only be reading relevant news that aligns with biblical prophecy. Millions affected after deadly floods hit India and Bangladesh. This is also judgment from Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. The United Kingdom has the highest inflation in the G7. Soaring food prices pushed British consumer inflation to 40-year high of 9.1% last month. The highest rate out of the group of 7 countries and underlines 70 of the cost of a living crunch. The reading up
It is certainly a bizarre sight to see. You know, the UK has been largely back to normal since the pandemic for a long time now, and so this, though, looks a lot like a day in the life of the UK at the height of the pandemic. These are the turnstiles. Normally people would be coming in here at a pretty rapid pace. It's just after 3 o'clock in the morning, so this should sort of be the beginning of the afternoon rush on a Tuesday afternoon, a work day in the middle of the week, but now the station is largely deserted. There's a lot of confused looking people standing around wondering what exactly to do. And there's odd sites like this where you see the stairs and the escalator up to some platforms that are closed off. There's a lot of them that are closed off. And for people who have managed to make it to London Bridge, we've talked to a lot of them who are having a lot of trouble getting elsewhere in London because of the tube strike also happening today, but also because of the train strike. If you look up here at the board, you'll notice on the right-hand column, normally this would say what time the next train to these destinations is. Well, for most things, they say ask staff. In other words, good luck. What I found really remarkable here, Becky, though, is that there are a lot of people who have some sympathy, a remarkable level of sympathy, even the ones that we've spoken to who managed to get here but had to turn back and go home because there was no realistic chance of getting to work. And so a lot of people have sympathy for these workers. The question is, how long is that sympathy for these striking rail workers actually going to last? Listen.
Everybody has their own issues with state, but it's not going to help if nobody can work, So, because they are saying everything is increasing, but you just have to go to work as well. Because if you don't work, you don't get paid.
It's very inconsiderate. I support like the action and stuff like that, but it's like come at the cost of everyday people.
Do you think that you'll make it at all today?
I hope so. I have patients waiting. I can't say no.
So people have started to ride the trains, to ride the London Underground again since the pandemic, but those numbers are not nearly back to what they were before the pandemic. And so as a result, the British government says that the status quo is not good enough. Things need to change in a fundamental way. The Prime Minister today called this strike wrong and unnecessary, especially because in his words, he says that the government spent billions of dollars to make sure that rail workers kept their jobs throughout the pandemic when trains, by and large, were not running. The union, though, sees things very differently. They say that by no fault of their own, they took a pay freeze for the last 2 years because of the pandemic, and now, with soaring inflation of 7%, they just want a wage that keeps up with that. The trouble is that 7% is a lot of money. It's going to get even worse later this year, and the British government says that they don't want to do anything like a huge public sector wage increase that might actually make the inflation situation even worse. But their options might be limited if this spirals beyond just rail workers. The largest union in this country, representing 1.3 million workers, Unison, they say that they are strike ready. The head of that union said that she would not rule out the possibility of a general strike this summer, Becky.
Reading on, the reading, up from 9% in April, matched the consensus of a Reuters poll of economists. Historical records from the Office for National Statistics show May's inflation was the highest since March 1982, and worse is likely to come. Sterling, one of the worst performing currencies against the US dollar this year, fell below $1.22, down 0.6% on the day. Some investors judge Britain to be at risk of both persistently high inflation and a recession, reflecting its large imported energy bill and continuous Brexit troubles, which could further hurt trade ties with the European Union. Toes breaking apart. Daniel was at the second or fourth chapter. Brothers can put that in the comment section. The economic outlook so unclear. No one knows how high inflation could go, and how long it will continue for, making physical and monetary policy judgments particularly tough, said Jack Leslie, senior economist at the Resolution Foundation and think tank. The point has pretty much been read in this article, but I will read this last paragraph. The Bank of England said last week that inflation was likely to remain above 9% over the coming months before peaking. Now to say that inflation will peak is to say inflation is transitory, which is bullshit. It's slightly above 11% in October. Rent-regulated household energy bills are due to rise again. The British government was doing all it could to combat a surge in prices, Financial Minister Rishi Sunak said after the data. So, prices for food and non-alcohol drinks rose by 8.7% in annual terms in May, the biggest jump since March 2009, and making this category the biggest driver of annual inflation last month. Overall consumer prices rose by 0.7% in monthly terms. May, the ONS said, a little more than 0.6% consensus. British factory gate price is a key determinant of prices later paid by consumers in shops, or 22.1% higher in May than a year earlier, the biggest increase since those records began in 1985, the ONS said. So that concludes the article, which Lord's will not leave in the description box as the point has been read. So now let's go back to the scriptures and conclude the lesson. Lord's willing, it was informative and edifying to the elect. Again, this is the book of Ezekiel, chapter 7, verse 25. Destruction cometh, and they shall seek peace, and there shall be none. So no peace will be available at this moment in time to the world, because the Most High is going to only continue to bring mischief and hell and destruction upon this world and upon these cities because of their pride, which the Lord is going to trouble. Mischief shall come upon mischief, and rumor shall be upon rumor. Then shall they seek the vision of the prophet. So when the Lord takes the prophets and off of the highways and byways and the internet, that's when they're going to try to seek out the prophets to ask, oh, what's going on? Why is all this happening? What's going to happen next? But by then it's going to be too late. But the law shall perish from the priest. So T.D. Jakes, Creflo Dollar, Joel Osteen, that Edomite hag that you people love to go to, they won't have the answers for you. By the law, or the law shall perish from the priest, and the counsel from the ancients. So with that, I conclude the lesson. But before I do that, I want to read. Spirit is telling me to read 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 3. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. So enough judgment and thing coming, and 2/3 they won't be able to escape. So with that, I pray this lesson was edifying and informative to the elect. Until the next Lord's, when I say Shalom.